In addition to having produced 10 episodes, Cory, we have just crossed 1,000 listens in our podcast.
What?
Yeah.
You mean...
Our podcast has been listened to.
1,000 people have listened to our podcast.
That's right. Either that or our podcast has been listened to 1,000 times by the same person.
I think we have metrics on that.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, so it's 1,000 unique listens.
Our MP3s have been downloaded over 1,000 times.
Holy crap. That's amazing.
It is amazing.
Thank you to everyone who has listened to us. I can't believe you trust us.
Yeah, and we're going to get into trust in just a moment. But first, a little bit of small talk to waste some time.
Welcome to Mindfulness of Doom, a weekly podcast about life, peaceful living, and existential dread. You're not lost. Everyone's faking it, and the purpose of life is, enjoy the show.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 10 of the Mindfulness of Doom podcast. Yes, you heard correctly. We are now in double digits of episodes.
It's amazing. Just a few months ago, we were at 0 podcasts, and then we went from 0 to a non-zero number of podcasts, and now we are in double digits.
Double digits. And it didn't take us very long. It was only 2.5 months. And you know, Cory, that really says something about our level of self-discipline. We should get a badge.
We should get a badge, but first, I think it's important that our impending doom is coming, and we should make an announcement that this week is the final week to enroll in healthcare for 2018. If you are an American listening to the podcast, go sign up for healthcare.
Yes, because your doom is coming, and you should probably get that covered.
Yeah, also, we have another announcement. Starting tomorrow, on Saturdays from 10:15 in the morning until 11 a.m. in the morning, I will be teaching a Buddhism 101 course at Energy Meditation in Miami Beach. Feel free to come by and join in on the lecture. We'll be talking about the basics of tenets of Buddhism and how we learned mindfulness and meditation practices and where they came from and how they came to be modern conceptions of mental health.
For those of you who have been longtime listeners of the podcast, you'll know that Cory has had experience studying Buddhism abroad in China at the Wooden Fish Project and also studying Zen in various monasteries around the East.
You know, I have more academic interest. Spiritually, it's been interesting to me and it's been very useful to my life. When somebody asks me, Cory, are you Buddhist? The short answer is yes, and the long answer is no.
Very good. So if you want to find out what that's about, go to Cory's class. You can find him at Energy Meditation in Miami Beach. Cory, it's been a couple weeks since I've been able to be on the podcast. If you can tell and you've listened before, my voice is still not quite 100%, but I am recovered enough to sit up straight, and I have a couple of cracked ribs, but I don't need to move around much while I'm recording. Since it's been a while since we've connected this way, I got to ask you, man, where's your head at?
Well, my head's been pretty occupied with the leak in my roof. Ever since Hurricane Irma came through Miami, whenever it rains, there's been a leak that's been leaking into my roommate's room. And she neglected to tell me about it until 2 months after it had happened. And she was just moving her bed every time it leaked and didn't mention it to me. So finally, we're getting it fixed. And then last week, I went into my bathroom. I stumbled into my bathroom in the middle of the night, and I turned on the overhead lamp, and I heard this buzzing sound. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And then all of a sudden, it sparked and rained down fire and sparks all over me while I was half asleep, stark-ass naked. Like, it scared the bejesus out of me.
So you almost died while naked and half asleep?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. So,
you know, that just goes to show that we have these ideal ways that we like to go, but it's never
naked.
Yeah.
No, let's not go naked.
And it doesn't usually work out the way we want it to, does it?
Some dignity. But yeah, aside from that, things are good at home. We're just getting that fixed in the roof. But aside from that, my apprenticeship with my first apprentice, Yutaka, is coming to a close. And I'm going to be shuffling him off onto another teacher.
Yes, there's going to be an apprenticeship transfer. Yutaka is going to be studying both mindfulness and drawing with me. And I'm really excited about this because these are two subjects that really support each other. that really to be able to draw and to see the world the way that an artist sees, we have to be mindful of what is around us and being with everything that we're copying onto paper as it is. And having mindfulness being supported by drawing, the more that I'm practicing being with the world as it is, it just naturally supports my development and my awareness. Yeah. And I'm really excited to share that with him.
Good. Yeah. Our apprenticeship was pretty successful, I think. We have been studying Tai Chi. We've been studying a lot of meditation. We've been getting pretty deep into our practice. We've had several classes in self-defense. Also learned a little bit of Japanese swordsmanship. We've also discussed a lot of English and philosophy. And it's been a very successful apprenticeship. But now that my time is being freed up, I am currently looking for more students. If you are interested in meditation, martial arts, self-defense, or philosophy, and you are in the Miami area, please feel free to send me a message at corydharma@gmail.com, CORYDHARMA@gmail.com if you're interested. And if you're not from the Miami area and are interested in an apprenticeship, you can also send me a message, and I may have rooms in my house available or can help find you lodging while you're here.
Yeah, I've got to say, I've watched Yutaka's development while he's with you, and I see him showing up as a very confident and powerful individual. And when he first arrived, he was a little bit timid. He was kind of a little bit held back by some cultural beliefs.
Dude, you should have seen him last night. Last night, we went up to this hotel. We got invited to this English school. We met one of the teachers there. They invited us out to hang out with their students, and Yutaka was talking to everybody, all the ladies.
Wow.
He was all over the place, talking left and right. His confidence is shot through the roof.
Yep.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, you can see it in the way that he moves. His English skills have improved drastically, and I'm just really impressed at what you guys have been able to do over the last month.
Great. Well, hopefully he'll be a good apprentice for you as well as he was for me. But Brian, where's your head at these days?
I'm really excited because
glad to have you back.
Yeah, thank you, man.
It was. I mean, I loved having Ivan here. Ivan was a fantastic guest, but I miss your voice.
I miss my voice too, actually. But I miss you. And while I was out, I was doing a lot of thinking, a lot of reading. As you know, I've been studying business and finance and accounting in my spare time. And I did a business workshop a couple of days ago. And one of the things that I got out of it was that I could actually separate my income from the work that I do and disassociate my identity with my revenue streams. And that was something that was really intriguing. And what I decided to do was to create an online course in using mindfulness to create your life purpose. And this will be something that's available very soon. Stay tuned, and I'll announce more details. But I'm really excited about this. And I had this stroke of inspiration last night. I was up until 3 a.m. outlining this course. And there are a few things missing. And one of the things that I'm really curious about is I want to know from you, our listeners, what is it that you want to know more about life purpose? And I asked this question to you, and I invite you to write in. You can send us an email to mindfulnessofdoom@gmail.com and let us know what you want to know more about life purpose.
Well, Brian, I got some bad news for you.
You have bad news for me every time I start rambling on.
I love having bad news for you when I cut you off.
Yeah.
That bad news is we're all going to die, and there's not much time left.
I don't necessarily see this as bad news.
We're going to cut the small talk right now. I'm going to cut you off right there. We got things to talk about. We got to get to the important things in life. Talking about life purpose and creating I'm trying to help people. Cut all that stuff. Let's get to the reason we're here.
There was a TED Talk that we were watching recently, and it was something that you had pulled up as sort of an inspiration to help out with my mindfulness class at Barry while I was gone.
Yeah, there's a great TED Talk by Amanda Palmer. She wrote a book called The Art of Asking, and she is she's the singer of the Dresden Dolls and some other musical groups. She talked about how she used to be one of those people that stood on like a box and painted herself all white and was one of those statues, living statues that stand there, and you walk down the street and you get all uncomfortable and they're looking at you and you're like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? And she's basically a living piece of art. She's got a little hat out there and you could drop some money in, and then she would make eye contact with you intensely and thank you for the donation that you give or not give. But anyway, the way that she has decided to start selling her music has been to give it away freely. that musicians have always been part of the community, and that we should find a way, instead of trying to figure out how to make people pay for music, to start figuring out how to ask people to pay.
How to let people pay.
How to let
really,
people pay. Yeah, because it's the thing is that not all entertainment is, if you put it behind a paywall, people fight to get in, and they fight for ways to get it for free. But she has this amazing inspirational talk about how to ask people. And it reminds me a lot about my time in the monasteries and having to learn about begging and asking for something that you don't particularly yourself need, but something that is almost you learn to support your cause by asking for things. And so it got us into this conversation about trusting people, and about that it's good to be open, it's good to be honest, it's good to let yourself out there, because we're all going to die and there's not a lot of time. And so you should live your life the way that you want to live it, and stop hiding who you are and let yourself out there.
Yeah, and when we connect with people, when we truly connect with them at a subconscious level,
right,
when we're present with them, it builds trust. And it eliminates any reason to distrust or to be fearful of the other.
But see, that's the thing, is I've been a martial arts enthusiast for 25 years, and I've been an instructor for the last 12 years. And the thing is that I think it's really important to be open. I think it's extremely important to learn about yourself and to know yourself, and to learn to love and to trust people. But at the same time, there's lots of people out there who lack the fundamental ability to understand that kind of lifestyle, because they lack the prerequisite knowledge and able to understand. And they will take advantage of you. And there are people that will hurt you simply because they just want to watch you be hurt, because they don't understand your worldview. They're coming at it from a different way. And so my question to you was, how do you encroach with these people? How do you engage with them? In the TED Talk, Amanda Palmer goes to a show and strips down naked and allows the audience to draw on her with Sharpies. And she basically says, hey, look, I am trusting you. Should I?
How I show up and what I put my attention on, if I'm putting my attention on trust, and I become a trusting person, then I compel others to be trusting in my space. But if I put my attention on fear and being wary and skeptical of people, then I compel people to show up that way and compel them to want to take advantage of me. If I show up a certain way before somebody like that, somebody who feels that they can take advantage of or manipulate other people, and I show up as trusting and willing to connect, it makes me unmessable with on a subconscious level for that person. They may feel something different in my presence that they haven't felt before.
If they have the sensitivity to notice that.
If they do. I'll acknowledge that there are people who don't have that sensitivity. But at the same time, because I show up the way that I show up, I don't attract many people like that into my life.
Well, you also already have a pretty established social network of people who are into mindfulness, who are into meditation, who are sensitive enough to come to a group and have a group conversation about racism or hatred or love or any of the other topics you have at Tiat La Casita. But those people that are invited there are invited there by friends who are also in that group. Mm-hmm. And it is a little bit of preaching to the choir, to put it lightly, and circle jerking, to put it less lightly.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, even in your university classes, like you are specifically teaching people who are educated enough to be able to go to college, to be able to have either parents or guardians that are willing to push them, or for them to have enough gumption to fill out the application forms and dedicate themselves to debt for a large portion of their adult lives. And there's a lot of people who aren't willing or comfortable or established enough to be able to even get that far. And I completely agree with your message. I just think that message can't be understood by a large portion of the population. Yeah. Simply because they haven't had the exposure. The prerequisite knowledge isn't there to be able to understand those higher concepts.
It's true. Where I show up, who I am surrounded by and where my offerings are and what they're geared toward, there is a certain type of person who is more likely to want to be around me based on what I share I'm about or what my offerings are. And at the same time, it wasn't always that way. I wasn't always the way that I am now. And even though I have an established social circle currently that is in alignment with certain values that I have or has a certain openness in their mindset, I didn't always have that. And who I used to be, if I think back to who I was before I was very well educated or before I got into mindfulness, I was somebody who would manipulate people. I was somebody who would take advantage of people. I was somebody who thought I was better than other people. And I was very arrogant and I was very cocky. And in a very subconscious way, I was looking to pick fights. I wanted to see if I could best somebody else in my field. I wanted to be a better artist than somebody else. I wanted to perform better academically in school. I wanted to one-up my competition. And I saw other people as threats to my own well-being. And what that compelled into my life experience was people seeing me as a threat and people treating me as competition and people trying to talk me down as though I were arrogant or conceited, which I couldn't see in myself at the time. And then I denied that I was that way. And so who I was compelled that response into my existence. It compelled people to treat me a certain way. And I had it that the world was a competition, that I had to be better than other people. And the evidence that showed up as a result was that the world was a competition and other people wouldn't want me to be better than they were.
I mean, especially in American culture, people from the United States are often pushed towards competition. They're taught that competition is a good thing, that it brings out some good element in people. You know, you look at sports and you listen to the announcers talk about the game and talk about the spirit of the game, the spirit of competition, and they're right, it exists, but it only exists for certain people. And there's other people who push the rules in order to go for the win. And there's a lot of people who don't care about how you couch the language. They just want to win.
It's a belief about life that life is a competition. It's a mindset completely, and it's something that we are taught to see in the world. And we're taught that that's just how the world is, and you have to perform, and you have to be better than, and other people are a threat, and you're competing for your raise, you're competing for your grades, you're competing for attention, you're competing for love. Like, there's not enough of any of that to go around, which I've found in my current life experience that that's not the case. But at one time, I bought into all of that, and that became my experience. And the mindset shift is not something that is easy to do, to let go of something that feels like a reality.
Yeah, we talked before about the difference of feelings that are real and the feeling when you have a strong feeling, even when you know in your head that that feeling is not reality. The feeling is real, but it isn't reality. When you have anxiety or an idea in your head that you start to have this daydream about, you continue to propagate an illusion to yourself of how something is, in times when you're trying to understand how another person behaved or why they behave that way, or how they feel about you. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe I love this person so much. Why don't they see that? Why don't they understand what they're doing to me? Like, that feeling is real, but the reality of that perspective rather isn't real. It's a one-sided thing that's missing a lot of knowledge.
Yeah, what I see it as is it's us creating a picture of ourselves as victims and attempting to survive in a world where everything is against us, and there's an impending sense of doom that if I don't perform, if I don't watch out for potential threats, if I don't compete for resources, I'm going to die. And it's scary, and I need to do something.
There's this book that I'm having my apprentice read called Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach. And he's a pretty famous author. That book and his book Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah, are both extremely good books, and I recommend them to anybody who's spiritually seeking. But in Jonathan Livingston Seagull, the first part of the book talks about a seagull who just wants to learn to fly. He just wants to learn to see how fast he can go and what kind of techniques he can learn. And all the other seagulls are like, no, you've got to eat. You've got to fight like hell for the rest of us to go out to the trolling ships and fight over scraps of chum that are being thrown in the water. And it's this huge mess of a society, and he just doesn't want to be part of it. He doesn't care. Like, he'd rather starve himself and learn to fly and die than trying to fight desperately to cling to life in the rat race like everybody else.
Yes, he's disillusioned with the system, the quote-unquote system of how the world is, whatever that means. He doesn't want to play the game. He sees where it's going. He sees how people get within it. He sees how people are struggling for survival. He sees how it creates stress and anxiety and how there's competition and they're fighting with each other. And that's of no interest.
Right. Well, I think he has a lack of fear of his mortality. I think all the other seagulls are fighting so hard to cling to life. They're doing it because they're afraid of death. They're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of the end. And so they fight so hard to keep it from coming, but in doing so, they waste their time and their life, and they forget what the purpose was. The purpose was to fly.
Yeah. I have wings. Let me use them.
Yeah.
There's this reality that we're all going to die unless we try to one-up each other is something that is entirely made up. And it feels so real because it's an agreement. When we talk about agreements could be anything like, okay, yes, money is real, and there's enough of us that think it's real that will use it. Or time is an agreement. Time is something that, yes, we all agree that it is 12 o'clock right now, and we have this clock system that operates on 60 minutes and 24 hours in a day, and this is really useful, so let's all do it. Yes, yes. And then we forget that it's an agreement that we made up. These are all tools that we've used to see the world in a certain way. And if you remove those things, nothing really changes except for the way that we relate to the reality around us. And we can choose to let go of agreements that don't serve us at any point. But in order to do so, we have to recognize that they're agreements and that they were made up in the first place. And then we can remove ourselves from them and begin to live differently with a different paradigm. Being able to see that the fight for survival is a paradigm. It's an agreement. Oh, this is just how the world is. There's limited resources and we have to fight for fish. That's something that we all made up. And if there's enough of us that believe it, then we'll live it like it's real.
In Buddhism, there's this concept of anatta, which is the doctrine of no soul or no self. It is the fundamental differing idea that separates it from all other world religions, and that most other world religions talk about the idea of a soul, a self, an ego. In Sanskrit, the Atman. This idea that there's an everlasting absolute entity that resides within you, and when you die will continue on in some fashion. Buddhism says that this is an illusion, that the soul, what we think of as the thinker of the thoughts, the feeler of the sensations, that concept is what we call the self, the person who gets the rewards, the person who gets the punishments. Those are it's a response to actions of conscious behavior or choice. But Buddhism is unique in this, and it says that it doesn't exist. And so this idea that actually argues the opposite, and that clinging to this idea of the self is what causes these harmful thoughts, this attachment, the hatred, the ill will, the egoism. It's the source of all the troubles, from wars and nations and internal strife and arguments of me and mine. You're pulling limited resources from a finite system, and that you have to struggle to get them. Otherwise, you're going to perish. But when you remove this idea of the self, you stop trying for self-protection, it attacks at the heart of what causes us suffering. It prevents us from having such struggles, and it lets us focus on the fact that you have wings, you have the ability to create art, you have a mind which is curious and inquisitive, and you can spend your time on this earth creating and fulfilling your interests and learning an art, learning a way of life that you can use to better yourself and live a life of purpose or a life of purposelessness. But either way, you're living life instead of running from death.
Yeah.
And running that rat race, that the scrambling for food, the scrambling for money, these are the things that hold people back. These are the things that make your life less enjoyable, less fulfilling, because those trappings are the things that are keeping you from what you really are looking for, that void that a lot of us feel, that hole in yourself that can't be filled with things or money or places or other people. It can only be filled with yourself.
This is the distinction between self-preservation and creative expression. When I manage my attention is only set on self-preservation, and I'm concerned about survival, I'm concerned about paying my bills, only wanting to eat, and where's my next meal going to come from? And that will certainly affect how I show up in my life. And the feelings that come along with self-preservation are those of worry, anxiety, troubledness, and desperation. And when I show up in my life that way for other people, it doesn't create a very fulfilling existence, and it does no service to anybody else. However, when I let go of this idea of self-preservation, as you were saying, in Buddhism, the self does not exist. If I can let go of my idea of self, everything that I believe about myself, all of my opinions, how I think the world is around me, if I can just for a moment sit with myself and be at peace with everything that I've ever thought about myself, and allow my mind to quiet and be still, slowly and little by little, the illusion of what I thought was who I was will begin to melt away. And in its place, I become nothing, which is an amazing experience.
Incredibly liberating.
From that place, I can be anything that I want. And as you're saying, I have this inquisitive mind, and I can create. I have hands. I can create art. I can.
You have opposable thumbs.
I have opposable thumbs. I mean, what a gift is that? Here we are in the trillions and trillions and trillions of years that the universe has ever existed, and all of the space on this little blue marble floating around, whirring around the sun that's moving in a vortex pattern through space for some reason. I'm just standing on this thing with opposable thumbs, and I can do whatever I want. I'm a seagull with wings. I can fly. Let me create and enjoy life.
I'm just upset, man. I don't have a prehensile tail, so I can't hang from trees with it and use tools with both my opposable thumbs.
You'll have to wait until the next life.
Come on, man. I was so close. I was so close to perfection. I just want that tail.
Bro, we've got robotics these days. You can have one surgically implanted and then have it neurologically synced and wired to your brain so that you can control it.
Like Spider-Man 2, Doc Ock style.
But like creatively, this is something that we can work on if we want to, right? I'm going to invent the human tail. And it's going to be a marvel to the world, and it's going to change humanity. Imagine that. Like, we can create that. And I'm so lit up by the expression of it. It's a really cool freaking idea.
So what you're telling me is you're into this idea of transhumanism and gene splicing, and we're going to be implementing various parts of animal DNA into our own code so we can grow tails.
Well, now
and wings.
We're about to alienate a portion of our listeners who are really deeply rooted in religious creationism camp.
I have a question for you, Brian.
Yeah.
If the technology were to exist within our lifetime to download your consciousness into a computer and your consciousness would live on, would you do it?
Oh, that's so fascinating. I don't think I would. I would be more interested in taking it with me wherever I go, letting it continue to live on the way that as it was intended. Although one could argue that, well, if humanity is able to create this and humanity is created as intended, then perhaps being able to download consciousness into a computer is what was intended.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I've often daydreamed about, like, what if they had, like, this trial, right? A trial, like, shot or serum or whatever that would give you, like, the ability to live forever. And then they, like, suddenly canceled it afterwards, realizing that it was against the human code. But I was one of the few people who got it before they canceled it. And then, like, I lived forever and just watched all the people I loved grow old and die in front of me. I made new relationships and they grow old and died. And then I made new relationships, they grow old and died. And then I got tired of making new relationships and having my heart broken. And I lived forever as this ongoing being, like, just collecting more and more knowledge and just, like, learning about suffering over and over and over again. And it would be terrible.
It would be, yes, it would be a hell. Well, it's as you said that in the last episode, it's our mortality, the finite nature of life that gives it its color, that gives it its vibrance. Because it comes to an end, because we're going to die, that gives life its meaning. We need to value what we have right now.
Who wants to live forever? Yeah, man, the Highlander just, like, it brought a lot of existential dread to me, and thinking of, like, oh man, like, would you really want that? Would you really want to have this unending life? It would be tragic, especially if you were the only one that had it.
And imagine you mastered every aspect of yourself, and everything you did was perfect all of the time, and you never made any more mistakes. You would become a god. And the reason that the gods created themselves as mortals was so that they could have this sort of exciting, surprising experience.
I don't know, that sounds incredibly boring.
To become a god?
I think I am a god. I think. And I'm gonna steal the. This has been said before. This isn't my philosophy. Alan Watts said it, and I'm sure a lot of other people have said it before him. You know, when they talk about the New Testament, is called the Gospels, and Gospels literally translates to good news. And I'm a fan of the idea that Jesus didn't say, "I am the Son of God," but "I am a Son of God." And that's what his good news was. That's what the gospel was. Is, hey, I am a son of God, and so are you.
Yeah.
And he was trying to say, this is it.
This is it.
This is heaven. You're in it right now. You're, like, all of it. Like, all the good parts and the bad parts, the suffering, the existence itself, that's heaven. And I'm a fan of this idea that life itself is sacred, and that, you know, there's no other evidence of outside worlds or afterlives or ghosts or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of people who believe in these things, but I don't see any evidence of it. So why am I going to spend my time pretending and hallucinating that there's something else out there when the life that's with me is ending 1 second at a time? And
yeah, look, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, right?
Yeah,
if there's something else that I'm not able to perceive right now, we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah, perhaps there is something on the other side, or some other realm of living that we just can't perceive that's right under our nose. But in the meantime,
I've got wings.
I've got stuff to do, you know? Like, I gotta... You know, I gotta go see Paris.
Yeah, and this is a matter
of Paris, but I mean, I gotta go see Milan.
This is a matter of perception.
The Disney movie, not the city.
I can choose to see the world that I exist in right now as my heaven, and my experience of it, I get to create moment to moment as an adventure, as an exciting time, and I get to develop my creativity and my expression within it, and the relationships that I have, and I can choose to be responsible for all of that, or I can choose to be the victim of it.
So talking about responsibility, since you brought it up, I have a conundrum for you.
Yeah, go for it.
This is a famous philosophical conundrum, quandary, problem. And it's been said many times before, but I'm gonna propose it to you. It's called the trolley problem. If you are standing next to train tracks, and the train is coming along, trolley, train, whatever, however you wish to couch it in your mind.
Yep, there's a train coming. There are tracks.
And there are 5 people working on the tracks, and they are about to be horrendously smushed into non-living.
They're working on the tracks, or are they tied to the tracks?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
However you like to think
I'm
of
going
it.
to pretend they're tied to the tracks.
They're tied. They're all damsels and dudes in distress.
Okay, so 5 people tied to tracks, impending doom coming.
Yeah, and then you have the option of throwing the switch that would divert the train onto a separate set of tracks that would crush one person who
Okay.
was also on the tracks, working or tied to. It doesn't matter.
Okay, 4
have-
came to tracks.
It's very loud. You can't yell out. You can't do anything else. You have 1 second to make this decision. Do you throw the switch or not?
Yes, I throw the switch. I choose to kill 1 person instead of 5.
You murdering bastard.
Well, what are you going to do?
Well, you could not do anything.
I could not
You
do
could
anything.
you could allow nature to run its course.
That's true. And I recognize that I am an expression of nature. And the thing is, what I realize in this scenario is that whether I choose to throw the switch or whether I choose not to throw the switch, I'm making a choice.
Okay.
And no matter what choice I make, there are consequences.
Okay.
Damned if I do and damned if I don't. I think that's where the expression comes from.
Right. So you are choosing that loss of life, human life, is a bad thing, and you would like to prevent it.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I can come at it from that perspective that yes, killing people is bad or death is bad. And so I would like to avoid as much death as possible.
Okay. All right. Let me give you a separate scenario.
All right, go for it.
By the way, if you're listening at home and you would like to play this trolley problem with us, feel free to email us your answers to these questions at mindfulnessofdoom@gmail.com. Tell us what you think. So,
Yes.
here's the second one. The train is coming down the tracks, and you are standing on a bridge that crosses over those tracks. The train is about to run over 5 people, just like in the first scenario. Except this time, you are standing next to a person. This person, for whatever reason, has the ability to... They have an incredible amount of mass.
Okay.
And if you were to push this person off of the bridge, it would kill this person, but it would stop the train from running over the 5 people. Would you kill this one person by
Okay.
pushing him off?
So in a closed theoretical scenario, I'm standing on a bridge, and there's a 100% probability that if I push this big fat guy off the bridge onto the tracks, it will stop the train and save 5 people. Okay, so they have an incredible amount of mass. Let's say there's a giant
Let's
on
just
the train.
say that their blood is very gummy and it would gum up the wheels.
Okay, very good.
But it would kill this person.
Okay.
Would you push this person off the train tracks to save these 5 people?
Yes.
Now, is this your first answer?
No, actually, so if we go back to when we first discussed this, I had in mind that within this close scenario, there was also a legal perspective. Because if I push this person and knowing that they're going to die, that would be constituted as murder, and then there would be direct personal consequences for me.
Okay, so you are only not pushing this person off because of self-preservation.
Correct.
Okay, but in the scenario where you are absolved of all wrongdoing, no matter what you do, you would push this person off to save 5 people.
Yes.
Because you believe that protecting life at all costs, even at the cost of other life,
Yeah.
is more important.
Right. And then we could even get into, okay, well, what if the value that this one person brings to the world is greater than the value that the other 5 people bring into the world? Then
Well, we
what do
don't
you do?
know. We don't know.
We really don't.
Maybe this person was about to cure cancer, and they had just had that eureka moment, and they hadn't written it down yet, and then you jumped in from out of the blue and said, "Huzzah!" and
I
just pushed them over the
I
edge.
just altered the course of human history.
This is like the answer to the universe is 42. Life, the universe, and everything. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Okay, yes.
It's a famous book where Earth was conceivably a giant supercomputer that was about to answer the question, what is the answer to life, the universe, and everything?
The answer is 42. This is the answer to life. It's the meaning of life.
But right before Earth was about to come up with the answer to the ultimate question to life, the universe, and everything, it was blown up at the last second to make way for a highway. It was
redlined.
Yeah.
It was targeted.
It was a bureaucratic waste.
Yes. That's very unfortunate.
So this person who just cured cancer, you got to save 5 people.
Yeah.
Now the point is, you have changed your opinion from how you originally thought because of
self-preservation.
Yeah. Which I argue pretty selfish.
It is selfish, and it's an example of how one might alter the course of their actions based on their idea of self.
A few weeks ago, you went on vacation, and then you were violently ill throughout the whole vacation.
Yes, I was coughing so hard that I cracked 2 of my ribs, and I have not been able to move very easily since. And even as I'm sitting here before you in our studio, I am doing my best not to cough because it's still incredibly painful.
I'm doing my best not to be funny so you don't laugh.
Ow, 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 ow. Okay.
So anyway, during that time, I covered for you at your classes.
Yes.
At Barry University, and
yes.
I gave your students this trolley problem, and most of them answered that in the first scenario they would throw the switch. Some people said no, they didn't want to be responsible, but the majority of students said they would throw the switch. They would throw the. One guy was like, "I'm going to throw that switch all day." He had no qualms about it, right? And then I gave them the other problem, and most of them switched their answers. Some people still said they wouldn't touch it. They didn't want to be included at all, involved in any way, or they'll just let life take its course. But some of them who had originally said to throw the switch changed their answers to say that they would not push this person off the bridge because the physical act of touching another human being and directly involving themselves in what ostensibly is murder made it more unappealing to them, although the end result of both scenarios is exactly the same.
People die.
People die, but the same number of people die either way. It's a utilitarian view of the universe. It's this idea that like the ends justify the means, and however we get there is less relevant than the means in which we got to that point.
By the way, I'm so happy that we're talking about theoretical death and not actual death.
Well, this is true, but I have yet to explain to you that the wrong answers to some of my questions today are electrified. And your microphone is set to explode should you say the wrong answer.
I suddenly have the urge to sneeze. That's really going to hurt my ribs. Hold on.
Use your mindfulness technique I taught you. Breathe out everything, and just don't breathe in until the urge to sneeze goes away. You cannot sneeze with empty lungs.
Okay, that worked.
Yes!
All right.
Mindfulness wins.
Success.
I tried to teach a bunch of monks that in China, and they gave me such a dirty look. But it's true. It works. I stand by this.
Whether I sneeze or whether I choose not to sneeze, it's the same outcome.
Okay, so you mentioned this idea of benefit, and then we've talked earlier about responsibility, and this idea that we haven't yet brought up about this idea about blame. Of like, oh, you did, when we said, would you throw the switch, and you'd be blamed for it. It all depends on your referent object, the thing that you revere the most. What is the thing that is most important to you? Now, in these closed scenarios, the assumption is that saving more lives is beneficial. Why? Beneficial to who? To society because it causes suffering when people die? But if you widen your view and you have a larger perspective, and we talk about something like, let's say, on time scales of hundreds of millions of years, humanity is not going to exist for that long. Our species will either evolve into different species or will all be extinct by that point. So if this were to be the case, or we're talking on the time scale of billions of years. In about 1 billion years, the sun is going to expand so much it's going to cook off the entirety of the Earth's atmosphere. And if we haven't found a way to move to another planet by then, all life on Earth will cease to exist.
Yeah.
And if that is the case, since this is mindfulness of doom.
Yeah. And by the way, if this is your first time listening, we're all going to die, and there's no need to panic because no one's going to leave you behind.
Great. So with that reminder in tow, since we're all going to die anyway, does it really matter if 5 people die versus 1 person dies?
In the grand scheme of things, from an objective perspective, no, it really doesn't. But you know what? It matters to those people.
It certainly matters to them and their families.
It's like the sage who's walking along the beach, and he is picking up starfish who have been stranded on dry land, and he throws them back into the ocean. And a child comes up to him and asks him, "There are so many starfish. What does it matter if you save them? And you're never going to be able to save them all." And the sage turns to the child and he goes, "Well, it matters to this starfish."
So it matters to that starfish during that starfish's life.
Yes. And in that starfish's experience of life, and that starfish's consciousness as a starfish, that starfish gets to continue experiencing reality from the perspective of a starfish, and continues to develop itself and create its karma for its next life cycle.
Oh man.
Here we go.
Oh, God.
Here we go.
You used the K word. Okay, I'm going to try not to have an aneurysm about this.
Let me have it, bro.
Brian, will you give me the definition of karma?
Oh my God. So karma is this thing where if you do stuff, then it you have consequences and then you get things in return. If I put something out in the universe, it's going to come back to me.
That's not what karma means.
Oh my God. So then okay, maybe if I do good things in life and then I get to come back as a good human being, and then better things will happen to me in my next life.
Oh my God, that's not what karma means.
Or maybe if I do really crummy things as a human being, then I'm going to come back as a criminal or a cockroach. Cory, will you explain to us in the studio and our listeners what karma actually is and where it comes from?
Please and thank you. So for those of you out there listening, karma does not mean what goes around comes around. The whole butterfly effect, butterfly flaps its wings and, karma causes a hurricane on the other side of the world. That's not karma. That is a tremendous misunderstanding of karma. Karma is never good. Karma is always bad. But let's back up a second. Karma literally means doing. It is your doing. When they say that you have accumulated karma, or when something has happened to you, they say it is your karma. They're really saying that there is no difference between what happens to you and what you choose to do. They are not saying that your actions will generate some sort of future benefit for you in a future life. That's not karma. That's called merit. But even then, let's stick with the karma idea. Let's not get into merit. That's a whole other can of worms.
That's a different episode.
Different episode. So the idea here is to understand that you are not separate from the universe. You are inseparable from it, in fact. Everything that you do is an expression of the universe. So when something happens, like when you digest your food, you did it. You didn't consciously do it. The conscious part of you has no control of that. When you choose the color of your eyes or your hair, you did that, but not the conscious part of you. So that is still your karma. That is your doing. When you choose to walk down the alley and there's 5 guys with knives there, that's your karma. When you bump into somebody on the street, an old long-term acquaintance, and they go, "Oh, hey, it's nice to see you. What are you doing here?" It's like, "Well, I normally walk down this street, but today I just had a feeling and I walked down that street. And I saw you." Great. That's your karma. It's what happens to you. But it's also what you choose to do. It's both.
Yes. There's no separation between how life happens to you and how you happen to life.
Yes.
And I love that perspective shift because we can choose moment to moment whether I'm a victim of life and the world that I'm creating around me, or whether I'm responsible and empowered in the life and the world that I'm creating around me.
Right. So the idea here is not to take solace in the fact that if you're a good person, good things will happen, because that's not really the point. The point is to say, when something bad does happen, understand that you have extremely limited control over how those things play out. And when the bad things do happen to you, it's your karma. It's what was supposed to happen. Or if not supposed to happen, it's just what did happen. It's basically another way of saying, those are the cards that were dealt to you. You can play them or not play them. Yeah. But that's your hand.
And the way that you choose to see it is your choice.
Yeah. So you have this idea of Brian, you brought up this word before, empowerment.
Yeah.
You can choose to not let it bother you, and that is true.
That is responsible for the situation that I am in.
Right.
I created this, that I walked down this alleyway and there are 5 guys there. I don't know how I created it, just like I don't know why my eyes are hazel.
Yeah.
But I created that situation by being there and walking in that direction.
It is an entirely unfortunate set of events for that kind of thing to happen.
It could be.
But it's not like a victim blaming thing. It's not like saying like, oh, it's your fault. It isn't about fault or responsibility.
Right. Fault and blame are incredibly unproductive.
Incredibly.
Yeah.
You are not responsible or the sole victor of your successes or the sole person to blame for your defeats. Like, those things happen to you for a tremendous variety of reasons. And if you attempt to claim credit for these things that happen to you, or choose to blame yourself for these things that happen to you, both of these things are wrong views, in the sense that you're only hurting yourself by thinking that when something good happens, it's because of you, and when something bad happens, it's because of you. It's like, not really. There's so much out there that you had no control over that led to those circumstances happening. So just be grateful that it did happen, or that it didn't happen.
Right.
Or understand that when something bad does happen to you, it wasn't your fault.
Right. But at the same time, I can choose to be responsible for it and to own the situation, and I can learn from it.
Right. When you have something terrible happen to you, and we're not saying that you should not try to prevent bad things from happening. You know, if you've got,
well, then we're just living in fear at that point.
Yeah, we're not encouraging anybody to go through life not trying to better their station in life. That's not really the point of this. But the point of it is to understand that when bad things do happen, understand that it's unfortunate, but you can still choose to learn from it. You can't choose what happens to you. You can't really choose your thoughts or your feelings or emotions. You can choose how you react to those feelings, how you react to those circumstances. And some people end up having really negative things happen to them and come out stronger for it because of their perspective and worldview, the way they attacked the problem.
Right. And that perspective that I choose to have, if I choose to take responsibility for every situation, every circumstance, moment to moment, that creates for me what I call an empowering context. I now see myself in command of my life and being responsible for all of it. And the only difference that really makes is it alters my life experience. It doesn't change the situations, and it doesn't change what happens. But within my being, within my body, I have a feeling of empowerment versus a feeling of victimhood. And that's really the only difference that is made in making that choice of seeing it differently. And at the end of the day, I'm responsible for creating the life of my preference. And I have a choice to make. Do I want to be the victim of life, or do I want to be empowered in my life? And I choose empowerment.
You know, I want to share a story about a friend of mine that I went to high school with. I didn't ask for her permission to share the story, so I'm going to keep her name confidential because it's, it wouldn't be a very nice thing for me to do. So, yes. But I do want to share the story itself because the way she reacted to it I was incredibly impressed. She has a newborn, and it turns out that there was some damage to the optical nerve, and it appears as if her child is going to be legally blind for most of her life, if not all of it. and she wasn't expecting this news. And so she went on Facebook and talked about how terrible it was that she didn't prepare for this news, that she knew that it was possible, but she kept being hopeful and optimistic that the doctors would come back with a better prognosis. But it turns out that wasn't the case. And she was kind of saying that this was the worst, and that she was kind of blaming herself, saying it's mostly my fault that I didn't prepare for this. And when I was reading that, I was like, "Oh no, don't blame yourself. It's not like that kind of thing." And then at the end of her post, she just shows this tremendous amount of courage and understanding of her situation, where she realized that, like, okay, look, this is not a great thing, but the good news is they happen to live in St. Augustine, which has the Florida School for the Deaf and Blind, which is, as I understand it, one of the best schools in the world for people with optical and audio issues. And she came out with this perspective from this terrible news. She's shown understanding and grace and optimism despite the difficulties.
Yeah. And
it's just tremendously encouraging to me when people respond in those kind of ways, and it's very uplifting, and my heart goes out to her and her family, and I hope that they are doing well.
I teach this class at Barry University. I teach a mindfulness class, and within the class, we do, yes, a lot of the self-observation and getting to know thyself, and practicing working with our senses and our thoughts and our beliefs and all of that.
Do you often speak in the thys and thous of Old English?
Typically not. But knowing thyself is a common phrase that most people don't know what it means. But in the context of mindfulness, getting to know oneself and all of the baggage that we carry, all of our thoughts, ideas, emotions, things that persist within our being, and then everything that's behind that. And I take this class a step further, and I see my students as seagulls, so to speak. That we all have wings, we all have the ability to be creative, and that there's a creative being that is wanting to express itself, that is beneath all of our limiting beliefs and identities that we've created in our lives so far. And I give my students a very interesting assignment. At the end of the semester, I ask them to put together a creative project using a skill or a talent that they don't believe that they have, and that if they actually created this project, it would make them incredibly uncomfortable, especially having to perform it or make a presentation about it in front of a group of total strangers, including their classmates. And the project idea scares the crap out of them. And this was something that you were able to help them with as well when you were covering for me in my class, and when you went in and you asked them about the trolley problem, and you were helping them kind of get the choice that they have to take action or not to take action, and to help them plan out their project. At the end of it, they were required to create video presentations of their projects. And my students have a choice to make. There's an obvious choice with consequences that, yes, you do the project so you can pass the class and not fail the class, so you can get your credits. But beneath that, there are some direct benefits to doing something that makes you incredibly uncomfortable. The choice to put yourself out there and to be responsible for how you're feeling when you're faced with a challenge that you're not familiar with. The ability to share something about yourself from within yourself in a way that you're not familiar with and that others are not familiar with, and allowing other people in your world to experience you in a way that they've never experienced you before, and to allow something within yourself to come out. And what that opens up for somebody, all of them were incredibly moving.
I saw all of them. They were amazing. Every one of them was great.
I was moved to tears for some of them, and I was moved to laughter for others. One of the students, for example, created a video of himself singing to music while in his car. And it was hilarious, and the purpose of his project was, I don't see myself as a singer, and I do this alone while I'm sitting in traffic because I enjoy it. But when it comes to expressing that side of myself when there are others watching, I feel utter embarrassment and I am ashamed of how I show up. And it was an opportunity for him to break through his shame. And while he was singing in front of the camera, while he was in his car, yes, he was incredibly embarrassed. And while you're watching the video, you can feel the level of embarrassment that he had. And there were times where he was covering the expression on his face, like he couldn't handle himself.
No, but I remember watching that video. I was smiling the whole time with him, not laughing at him, but just knowing that feeling so much, because I've been there too, buddy. Like,
Yeah.
it's something you can overcome, and you will, if you keep pushing outside your comfort zone. Have you ever heard of the term to be easily empathetically embarrassed? EEE.
No, what does that mean?
It's this thing where certain people with strong senses of empathy will feel embarrassed watching other people be embarrassed. It's kind of, cringe comedy.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
you see people in uncomfortable situations and you yourself feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, like the Jackass kind of TV shows and that kind of thing.
There's an appeal to that.
Yeah, I hate that kind of thing because I cannot disassociate the person being picked on or the person being pranked from my own self, and I watch it and I feel embarrassed for them. I feel what they're feeling,
Right.
Really intensely, and I don't I get the joke. I see why it's funny to like, haha, that guy got pushed down the stairs, but I feel worse for the guy got him pushed down the stairs than I do feel funny for the people laughing at it, and
Yeah.
I cannot watch certain TV shows. Like,
I'm with you. What is the term? Schadenfreude? It's like the taking pleasure in other people's pain. I think
Yeah.
that's that's the market that this kind of comedy is intended for.
it is, but
we totally are not
things-
in that boat.
yeah, shows like Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and Arrested Development, The Office. Like, I watch them and it just makes me cringe so much. I can't. It's uncomfortable for me to even sit through it because I get just as embarrassed watching them being embarrassed.
Yeah.
But
for the person going through that embarrassment and breaking through it and actually feeling it fully, there's an opportunity that opens up on the other side, which is to get to know oneself beyond that discomfort.
Oh, certainly. And when you are that person who is embarrassed, that person who is stepping out of your comfort zone, let me tell you, kudos to you, because the only way to make your comfort zone grow is to step out of it.
Yeah. Well, and this is why I constantly throw myself into uncomfortable situations and why I have my students do the same. There was another student who came up to me before she produced her project, and she said, "Hey, listen, I know you were asking for video, and there's something I was considering doing for my project that now I'm having second thoughts about because it makes me really uncomfortable, and I'm not so sure that I want to share it with anybody else." And I asked her, I said, "Well, listen, I totally get that you're uncomfortable with it, and it's something that you really don't want to share, but I'm going to ask you one question, and then you're welcome to consider whether you'd like to do it or pick something else." And I asked her, what would become available for you if whatever it is that you haven't been willing to share was finally out in the open? And the only thing that she said afterwards was, "Okay, I got it." And she submitted this video where she produced this incredibly beautiful painting that was representative of her childhood and her aspirations to grow into an adult out of the childhood that she lived. And she described a childhood that was incredibly painful with a very abusive alcoholic father who wanted to control everything about her and was ashamed of her and never wanted her to be born. And that was her experience growing up in the early years of her life. And she shared in her video very gruesome details of what her experience was like, that she would show up to school wearing hoodies and sweatshirts on the hottest days of the year just to hide the marks on her body. And it was something that she had never shared with anybody before. Because she kept that to herself, it had drastically diminished her ability to express herself and to be willing to connect with people.
It was amazing watching these students open up and share their uncomfortableness and their suffering and their doubts and their fears. And it was tremendously encouraging for me to be a part of that, to help them choose their projects and help them go along with it. And just to all of those students, you guys are beautiful and amazing, and all of you shared your suffering in one way or another, or some accomplishment by overcoming doubts and fears of public speaking or of sharing something personal, talking about depression, talking about a rough upbringing, talking about being embarrassed to perform in public, even just the simple things of not having yet pursued an interest in gardening, or that had always been an interest and kind of had been on the back burner for forever and has yet to kind of take form and take shape, and that shows a tremendous amount of courage.
One student decided to take on learning how to knit because her grandmother had always knitted, and the skill hadn't been passed down through the generations, and it was something that she wondered about, and finally worked up the courage to ask for help and to ask somebody to teach her. And she knitted this beautiful hat.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was really impressed. I was like, oh man, I want one of those.
Yeah, and it wasn't as difficult as she thought it would be.
She should open up an Etsy account and start selling these things.
But the poetry, the artwork, the one girl was really curious about the fashion industry and had it that, well, maybe I'll create clothes one day. And she asked her mom to teach her how to sew, and she made an outfit, pants and a blouse. And it was wonderful, and the way that she edited her video together was very professionally done as well.
One student got on there, and he was talking about, I had never learned to draw before, and I watched him get up there and show his drawings that he had made, and I was like, oh my God, I have always loved this skill in other people, and I've spent so little time pursuing it myself. Mm-hmm. And he would show, well, this is my first one, this is my second one, this is my third one, this is my fourth one. And with each one, you could already tell massive improvements. And it was just like, oh my God, I want that. I want to do what you're doing. It was great.
Like from not believing that he could do it to getting progressively better with each iteration, and not being afraid to continue on, and yes, judging ourselves for maybe not being that good yet, but getting past the judgment and having the courage to continue on. It was all really moving. And there was one in particular that stood out just because we're podcast hosts. One of the students told me that he had listened to several of our podcast episodes and decided that he wanted to produce a podcast. And
that's very flattering.
I know, and he realized that he was very much about self-expression, and up until this point, he had been unwilling to express certain aspects of himself, including his sexuality, and he realized that there were other people who were going through the same thing, and he wanted to, in an interview format, create a sample podcast. So he created a 7-minute video. He had a guest, and they talked about self-expression and breaking free.
He did 2 episodes.
He did 2 videos. He was very excited.
That was fantastic. I thought it was great. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to make a podcast. It's like, no, I'm going to make 2 podcasts.
And it was all about breaking free of cultural expectations and family expectations about how we should be when we grow up.
Oh, it's amazing. These students really, they went out of their way to share a part of themselves. And I was thoroughly impressed, and I congratulate every one of you for letting yourselves out, for being who you are, and for sharing those things that you're interested in, sharing those difficult moments, sharing the things that you're embarrassed about, sharing your hearts. And it was tremendously uplifting, and I think all of you are amazing human beings, and I'm excited to see what you guys do next.
You guys, speaking directly to you as my students, I'm incredibly impressed, and I want to acknowledge your courage and your willingness to grow beyond what you thought was possible for you. And I, too, am excited to see what opens up for you when we continue to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations and to grow through those and to mindfully be present with all of the fears, all of the anxieties, all of the negative, downtrodden thoughts that come up when we're faced with new challenges and we finally break through them. New possibilities open up and our lives will never be the same.
Thank you so much for listening to us and having us on in the background while not paying attention to what we have to say.
That's right. And it's now time for our real fake sponsors. We don't yet have any real sponsors on Mindfulness of Doom, but we do have real fake sponsors. This podcast brought to you by taking responsibility for your actions. You don't have to do it, but it's a really good idea.
This podcast is also brought to you by Trolley Tracks. Trolley Tracks, the number one choice of mustachioed villains and philosophers since 1804.
Mindfulness of Doom is also brought to you by our friends over at They Laboratories, who have been working on an experimental human immortality serum, which is no longer available to the general market.
This episode of Mindfulness of Doom is also brought to you by The Idea of Karma. The Idea of Karma. You've got it wrong.
And finally, this podcast brought to you by Blaming the World for Your Problems. Stop it.
That brings us to our last segment of the show, our number one fan. Our number one fan this week is still Cara Caterson, reigning champion, 2 weeks strong. She is going to be our number one fan until someone else tells us that they're our number one fan.
Yeah, so if you do happen to be our number one fan, send us a message on Facebook or write in to mindfulnessofdoom@gmail.com or stalk us and find us in person. Actually, don't stalk us. That's kind of creepy, but if you do, we'll be flattered. Mindfulness of Doom is a free podcast that we do for the love of mindfulness and for the love of you. And if you appreciate what we're sharing with you, you can contribute as little as $1 a month through our Patreon page. You can find us at www.patreon.com/mindfulnessofdoom.
We'll see y'all next week.
We invite you to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast on iTunes and wherever podcasts of real quality can be found. Have suggestions, music, or artwork for the show? Want to sponsor our podcast? Find our contact page and links to the items we talked about in this episode at www.mindfulnessofdoom.com.
This podcast is recorded at the Center for Social Change in Miami, Florida. It is written, edited, and recorded by Brian Lemmerman and Cory Hardacre. Our music is by Pallettown and can be found at soundcloud.com/Pallettown. All poorly thought out opinions are ours. Nothing you hear in this podcast should be construed as professional medical advice. Go see a therapist, all of you.
That's it. The song is over. The song is over.
The song is over?
It's over.
The show's over?
The show is over.
The show's over.